Welcome to Summer of Action on Advocacy Writing. I know we've got a small group today, but this will be a resource that others can use in the future, listen to the recording when the opportunity comes for them to write something. So first of all, my name is Kim Anderson, and I'm the Director of Mission Mobilization here at the Evangelical Environmental Network. And my favorite part of my job is helping to equip Christians to take action and to advocate in various types of ways, one of which is in writing for advocacy. So I'd like to start off with why do we want to consider writing for advocacy? And I'm going to tell a story to answer that question. This is Jack Joseph, who lives in Columbus, Ohio. And about a year ago, he testified for an EPA hearing. And we took his testimony, his 3 to 4 minute testimony, and turned it into a letter to the editor. And then that got published in the Columbus Dispatch. And then we also, afterwards, we highlighted that on social media. So Jack was able to take multiple actions on this one issue and get the attention. We later found out he received a handwritten letter from his senator, Sherrod Brown, saying, "Thank you for the work that you're doing. We really appreciate it." And he knew that it came actually from the senator and not just from a staffer, because Sherrod Brown has famously unique handwriting. So he could recognize the handwriting. So that is one example that, we had an actual senator who read this, and we've heard that Sherrod Brown does that. We've heard other examples of that, but we know that somebody actually read this that votes on things, and you might not always get a letter thanking you, and maybe sometimes it will be a staff member writing it, but they keep track of these things, and it's one of the ways that they listen to the public. So letters to the editor and op-eds can be very important ways to get the attention of your policymaker or your peers that live near you. Maybe you would highlight an issue that they haven't heard of before. So it's very important to write for advocacy, and we're going to talk about the nuts and bolts of that today. So some tips for getting started, and we'll go into more detail on all of these, is first of all, select your ask. What is the issue that you want to talk about? What are you asking people to do as a result of this? You also want to select your target publication, and we'll go into more detail on this as well. And then there's 2 different types of advocacy writing. One is a letter to the editor. The other is an op-ed. For an op-ed, you will do a pitch where you will try to sell, not for money, but try to get your newspaper to want to publish your piece. And so we have some information on how to do that. And then finally, follow up. I'll highlight this a lot throughout our time here today, but I have seen so many times where somebody sends in a letter to the editor, an op-ed, and they don't hear anything for a couple of days. So a few days later, they follow up. And in many cases, we've seen it go from not being published to published just because somebody took the initiative to follow up a few days later. So it's very important to take that action. So in terms of finding a publication, Google is your best friend. You can, if you want to write a letter to the editor, an op-ed for a state paper, you might Google, what are the newspapers? What's the biggest newspaper in X state, or things like that. So you can begin by using Google. You can look up a paper, or go to the target newspaper, the target city, and find the newspaper. And then you can find information. I'll usually put in, when I'm helping somebody submit a letter to the editor, I'll put in, Columbus Dispatch, letter to the editor, submission, and it'll bring up the information on that. So then you want to look for the information on the submission information or page. For a lot of letter to the editors at newspapers, they'll have a form where you put in your name and your contact information, and then there's a space for you to put in the body of your letter to the editor. And so they make it kind of easy for you to do that. So you want to try to find that page if it exists. For an op-ed, then that would be the time to do the pitch and to explain why you think this is important. For op-eds, usually there's a contact person you can find on the website. And for all of it, you want to be short, sweet, and, like I said, persistent, because following up can pay off. And then finally, make it easy for them. And we'll talk about that in more detail. So what is the difference between a letter to the editor and an op-ed? These are some terms that I've thrown out. So the main difference is length. So letters to the editor tend to be shorter, usually 250 words or less. There are some newspapers that require 175 or 200 words, and it can be challenging to get your point across in so few words, but it's possible. And, a lot of times we'll start off with, just writing it and then looking at how many words it is, and then going through and deciding what's important and what's not important and cutting it down to whatever the length is. The newspapers that have the form, usually it won't accept any more words than that. So if it's 250 words and you type 251, it will cut off that last word. So you want to pay attention to that as well. Often letters to the editor respond to another article or current event. And I've heard that you're more likely to get it published if you link to the newspaper, to that newspaper that you're submitting it to, you link to another article, because that gets them more views on the article that was already published. And letters to the editor are one of the most read pages. So lots of people will go, you can get a lot of attention and lots of readers by having a letter to the editor published. And because they're smaller, they're easier to get published. An op-ed, on the other hand, tends to be 650 or 800 words. And again, you want to check with your publication. You want it to be on a new, interesting, or unexpected topic. You want to have some kind of a link that catches people's attention. You also want to make sure that it's relevant in a few weeks. So in 6 or 8 weeks, is this something people might still be talking about? You're more likely to get an op-ed published if that's the case. And they are more challenging to get published because they are longer and they don't have as much space to publish as many of them. So those are the main differences between letters to the editor and op-ed. Now we're going to delve into letters to the editor and specifics on those for a couple of minutes. So a rough outline for the letter to the editor is to introduce yourself, talk about why you care. So as a Christian or as a mother, as a doctor, whatever it is that makes you unique to tell this story. Then you want to share your why I care about this. You can go broader and share scripture or local impacts. Local impacts are always great to share if you're posting it in a local newspaper. And then you want to make the ask or offer a solution to conclude. So that's kind of the general outline. And this can work for op-eds as well as letters to the editor. Some ideas for calls to action. You want to ask people to vote for candidates who take the climate crisis and pollution seriously. So that would be one ask that you could have. You want to urge your leaders in Washington or your state capital to support a certain issue. So you might be highlighting an issue and asking a government body to take action on it. And you also might be urging your readers to learn more about an issue and take it seriously. You could be educating people and wanting people to learn more and then take action on it as well. A couple of examples of different types of letters to the editor. First, we have a response to an article. So you start out establishing your identity, again, among evangelicals or as a mother, whatever your personal reason for writing this letter is. You want to address something from an original article that was published in this newspaper. And you can link directly to that article so that makes it easier for the newspaper. And then have an invitational closing, but make sure that you're not combative. So we're inviting, whoever to take whatever the action is, and make it friendly and invitational, but not in a way that you're going to alienate people. Next, we have current events. And one example of this is last year we had the wildfires that caused, a haze over so much of the United States. So that was an example of a current event that we could write letters to the editor about and relate it to a lot of the issues that we talk about here at EEN. So, it's relevant and starts off getting to the point. It brings it to a current event that makes it relevant that people are already talking about. Next, you can make it local by including some statistics about the impact on the area near you and what that impact is. So many people have asthma or whatever the impact is that is local. And then bring it back to scripture and why you care. And then in the end, having a simple asking a certain government body or a group of people to take a certain action. And then finally, we have those that might highlight an issue or a proposed bill. And just want to point out, you'll notice that these have similar pieces that all kind of fit together. There is no magic order for any of these, but except that you want to have an ask at the end and explain why you care and some kind of a hook in the beginning. So in this one, we started off with explaining why and including scripture. We linked it back to the bill, an energy efficiency bill in Ohio, making it local, again, adding some information about a local statistic. And then in the end, having a simple ask, asking the legislators to support the bill and asking people to reach out to their legislators to ask them to support the bill as well. So those are some examples of various types of letters to the editor that you might write. Next, we have the op-ed, and a way that you might want to structure the op-ed is first start off by a lead. You want to have something that's attention grabbing as an opening, usually around a news hook. One thing that you can do that's very important in both letters to the editor or op-eds is make it personal, tell your story, help people understand why you care. That is a good way to get people to pay attention. Next, your thesis, which can be either explicit or implied. We'll talk more about your thesis in a moment. And then evidence-based arguments. There's lots of ways to make an evidence-based argument, but like your high school paper that you write, you might have 3 points and you want it to be backed up with evidence. And then in the end, have a conclusion where you circle back to your lead, and then you also hook it to the ask of what you're asking people to do as a result of this. And then, so to dig into each of these sections a little bit more, first, your lead is something that grabs your reader's attention. It's an introduction. It's a hook that ties your idea and gets people to think about it and to care along with you. And it's a variety of ways you can do this. You can use the news. You can have an anecdote. You can reference something in pop culture or a certain anniversary, things like that would come up as ways that you can have a lead or get people's attention right from the beginning. And then in terms of your thesis, some suggestions are, in terms of the thesis you want to ask for, is you could have a challenge to your elected officials to listen to what Christians are saying and to enact positive climate legislation or legislation that curbs pollution. Then you could have a call for your fellow Christians to hold elected officials accountable. So you could be asking Christians to reach out to their local official to take bold climate action. And then an argument for how Christians are talking about taking climate change seriously and taking action. So when it comes time to pitch your op-ed, like I said, with a letter to the editor, usually you just send them the letter to the editor through the online form, or you might find the editor and email it to them. But an op-ed can be a little different because they might not have time to read the whole 800 words that you wrote. It takes them a little more time to do that. So you want to kind of summarize that, explain to them why it's important. So this is how you might pitch your op-ed. Start by choosing your outlet of choice and researching how to send in your piece. Again, Google is a great tool for this, but Lindsay's going to put a link in the chat for the op-ed project that has a compilation of newspapers across the United States and ways to submit op-eds to them. Then next we have crafting your pitch. So first of all, why me? Why am I the one to write this piece? What is my unique story? Second of all, why now? Why is this newsworthy at this moment? So having some, in your pitch to the editor, you want to include why it's important and why it's important at that moment. And then next, you want to have the why should people care? Specifically, why would the readers of this newspaper care about this issue and this op-ed at this moment? And then you want to have your thesis in your first sentence or two. So they don't have to search for what that is. You want to include the main point of your op-ed within the first couple of sentences. And then your pitch should be all within 150 words or less. So again, you're taking your 800 words, 650 to 800 words, and summarizing it to try to get the editor to publish your piece. And you want to copy and paste your piece directly into the body of the email instead of putting it as an attachment. You can do both, but definitely you want to make sure that the piece is in the body of the email so that they don't have to go the extra step of going to the attachment. And then finally, again, follow up, because it can make the difference between it sitting in their inbox and it getting published. By, you don't want to be annoying, but you can be persistent. Maybe give it a couple days, follow up once, give it another couple days, and follow up again. If at that point you don't hear from them, maybe you could consider another newspaper. And that is something that our staff and our members have done, where they'll have it sent to another newspaper and then it'll get published there. And then expect rejections. You don't necessarily always get a rejection that says we're not going to publish it, but don't take it as a rejection if it doesn't get published. It's a feature of the process and not a bug, and it's not a sign of failure. A lot of times they have similar articles that they've already had published, and they just want to wait until it's relevant, and you might be able to get it published in another newspaper. So keep on at it and edit. I did have one time when I sent an op-ed in about a year ago. They came back to me after I followed up a couple times. They said, just wanted to explain the reason why we're not publishing this. And it was because it was something that a lot of people were talking about. And so there was nothing wrong with my piece. It's just that a lot of people had already submitted things on that topic. And so they weren't going to publish it at that time. And we ended up getting it published at another newspaper. So you don't always get follow-up. That's very rare. But just know that a lot of the times it just has to do with what else they have going on, and it's nothing about your piece. One example of a pitch is you want to make sure that in your email you've got a clear subject with a possible headline. You want to have the why me and your thesis early on, the why now and the so what, and then again paste the whole piece into the body of the email so that they don't have to go find an attachment. So that is a good summary of both op-eds and letters to the editor. Just wondering if at this point anybody has any questions. And if so, you can put them in the chat and we can go ahead and answer them. And if not, I can share my contact information. I'll put that in the chat. I do just want to point out the EEN is here to help you. We have walked people through the process, looked at drafts, helped them get them submitted and published. And so we are here to help you in any way that we can. And if you live in an area where it might be strategic to have something published, we might reach out to you and ask if you'd be willing to have a letter to the editor published in the future as well. So watch out for that. But in the meantime, if you want to reach me, Lindsay put my email in the chat. It's kim@creationcare.org. And I am more than happy to walk through writing a letter to the editor with you at whatever level you need. So please reach out to me if you have any questions. Thank you.